Welcome to CPAC Now, America Uncanceled, and Happy New Year from the CPAC family. Joining me, my husband, Matt Schlapp, and CPAC board member, Bill Walton, also host of The Bill Walton Show. Thank you for joining us.
Great to be here, yeah.
Now, we're kind of being spoiled here, Matt, right? Because we're not in the swamp. We're out in Rappahannock County.
We're in the lodge.
We're in the
You're
lodge.
in the lodge.
We are in the lodge. And when we come out here, I have to tell you, we have an incredible group of, I would say, intellects, people who are, we have our farmers out here, and it's really, truly, I think you get a great sense of what's happening here in America.
Exactly, yeah.
So
Yeah.
let's jump right in. Bidenomics. This is kind of a big deal because we've seen all this information out there from, every possible headline. Wall Street Journal saying the economy is great. Why are Americans in such a rotten mood? So I'm going to ask you that question, Bill, because you come from this world of understanding economics. You come from the world of understanding Wall Street. What's happening in Main Street America?
Well, the economy is great if you're a big investor in the stock market right now. We just ending up on record highs, and the economy is great if you're already rich. But if it's not so great, if you recognize you're already paying 20% more for what you bought 2 years ago, you're also not feeling so great because what's happened with the Biden administration, it's never been about economics. It's never been about flourishing. It's been about the climate agenda, and it's about diversity, equity, and inclusion agenda, and now it's about an open border. And so these economic polls get confused. It's not about a GDP number. It's how people are feeling in their daily lives. And right now, people are not feeling hopeful for the future.
So the major indices, stock indices, are all up for the year?
Yes.
And substantially?
Yes. Yeah.
So, there were some dips and people were saying, hey, maybe Wall Street's going to feel it, but so far been pretty pain-free for Wall Street.
Well, we've got the Magnificent Seven, which are all the evil social media companies, which have just been thriving. They're up 65, 70%. They had a dip earlier in the year, and now it's all come back. And most of the other sectors have come up as well. I mean, there are a lot of other equities you don't want to own. For example, you don't want to own China.
Yeah.
China has underperformed for the last 4 straight years.
And you've done a deep dive into China and what is happening there and its impact on the American economy and really their strategic play globally. Talk to us about that. Where is China in terms of its impact on the U.S. economy?
Well, the top line is that China forever, under previous leaders, had the strategy of hide and bide, which is develop their economy, work with the West, invite people in, companies to invest, bring in technologies. By the way, they ended up taking most of the technologies, and it was a very deep economic strategy to get us entangled with them. Xi now has revealed himself to be flat out interested in dominating not only the Pacific region, but really now is looking like the world. And he's systematically shutting down the free market pieces of China. And if you're an entrepreneur now, he's arrested, I don't know, maybe 8 to 10 billionaires in the last year because they didn't toe the Chinese Communist Party line. So it's in a state of transition. The problem we've got is that the United States companies, multinationals, and financial firms have almost $2 trillion invested in China. And up until recently, a lot of U.S. investors through the mutual funds had big investments in China. And there's now a lot of work on that one where we're beginning. Roger Robertson in particular has been working to shine a light on that. And we're beginning to get the Chinese companies out of the indexes. So stay tuned, but we're still left with a very entangled.
So you say entangle, how do you unentangle? I mean, this is this whole supply chain question, and then you have the secondary question, which is, you have these sunk costs in China. When this happened in Venezuela, people, their goods or their investments were appropriated, or they just walked away because they couldn't deal with the government anymore. It's hard to walk away from trillions of dollars.
It's almost impossible to walk away from it. That's a big problem. It's a thorny problem because Starbucks has more stores in China than they do in the United States. Apple, they can't build an iPhone without China's involvement.
Cars, pharmaceuticals. I mean, the list goes on and on.
There are dependencies. We've allowed aspirin and antibiotics all to be manufactured in China.
And none of that's been fixed over these years when we noticed the supply chain problem when the Chinese Corona thing hit. And we haven't had enough change.
Trump and his trade representative Bob Lighthizer were all over it. They understood it, but it's going to take a long time. And to fix it, you have to recognize you have a problem. And the Biden administration doesn't see it that way. They've had, there are basically 3 or 4 big things they've wanted. One, they've been focused on their radical climate change agenda and transitioning the economy away from fossil fuels at catastrophic cost. Second thing is a diversity, equity, and inclusion agenda, which is another reason people aren't feeling good because, if you're a white middle-class kid, you don't feel like the opportunities are there because they're going to all the other privileged groups.
Because they're not there.
And then we've got an open border, which is, flooding the country, who knows
With
who.
Chinese nationals
With Chinese nationals
Plus
coming in.
Middle Eastern men, single able-bodied men coming in as well through the border.
And China is really looms as huge. And Janet Yellen, our Treasury Secretary, goes over there and really, I wish we could roll the camera here and see the bows. She bowed.
Yeah, she did.
Remember Obama's bows to all the dictators in the Middle East? Well, she made him look regal by comparison. They're looking for economic engagement. They still want to make deals. They don't recognize the nature of the problem we have. So to make the change, you need political leadership to tell the companies to do this or do that.
Right. Interestingly enough, you mentioned Bidenomics and the link to the border, which people don't think about the economy as somehow linked to the border in any way. People view it as almost separate. They view it as a national security issue, but it sounds like this is an economic security issue.
People feel about the economy not with what they have today, but what they think they'll have tomorrow and what they think the prospects are for their family. And if you look out at the trends, you say, I'm not feeling so good because all these arrows are pointing the wrong direction. So it's not the fact that we've got a 3.2% unemployment rate or whatever the actual number is, or the GDP grew at X%. Nobody cares about that.
So Biden really cannot sell the Bidenomics plan. What does that mean politically?
Well, I would just say, going back to this question of, what did you call them, the evil 8 or whatever.
The Magnificent Seven, although I just heard, I heard this morning it could be the Magnificent 8. I don't know who,
Evil 8, I think it's better.
Evil 8's better.
Or Malignant 8 or whatever we want to say. But the thing is this, which is Clinton had all these kind of, they don't even seem radical compared to Obama and Biden. But he had these kind of big government plans, including taking over healthcare and stuff. And the whole mantra was, if we can just keep the street happy. It was always about if you keep Wall Street happy. And I think the reason why they're still calling it Bidenomics is because they can point to the gains in the stock market and say, hey, look, things are going pretty well. And what you're saying is that that's almost like an opium to keep us happy. Underneath this these fragile gains is this systemic, complete change in how our economy will operate. No more gas-powered vehicles, no more diesel-powered vehicles. This is really, really radical. And when you said this about the hopelessness, if you can't check one of those boxes on the diversity, equity, and inclusion agenda, you're screwed in this economy.
You are screwed, and you talk about the other side of the household economy. There's the money coming in, and then it's what you can spend it on. We now can't buy a gas stove.
Right.
We're now being mandated to buy an electric vehicle.
Have the gas
She can have it. We've seen pictures of it. It's quite nice.
Yes.
I'm sure we paid a fortune for it. But that's the kind of thing that people are feeling. And Wayne Cruz at Competitive Enterprise Institute writes something called 10,000 Commandments, and he's been doing this for 20 years now, 30 years. And his take is that there's every single agency in the government has been weaponized on these agendas, and they're passing regulation after regulation after regulation. There's a deadweight cost. I mean, you understand this, running a small business. Look at all the regulatory things you've got to deal with instead of thinking about the product or servicing your customer.
But there's this other question, Bill, which is, we used to call it the middle class. I don't even know if we can call it that anymore. But for the middle class, the whole idea was you could find employment, and it was steady enough where you could plan financially. you could look forward to having some type of retirement security, but you could buy a house.
Yes.
And buying a house was kind of the ticket to building wealth, right? Yeah, your house would gain in value and you'd pay off the debt over time. And is it psychological or real, there's a huge barrier because mortgage interest rates are just sky high. Nobody's refinancing. And also, they don't want us to own. They want us to rent or borrow everything. They don't like this idea of owning
my
things.
question, Schlapp.
But I just feel like that has to be part of this
Klaus
psychology.
Schwab of
Yeah.
World Economic Forum, you will own nothing and you will be happy.
Yeah. Yes.
Or he'll own everything that you own,
He will
that you
still
use.
own
But,
Yeah.
but Bill, I do think this is why you're seeing this young voter, the millennial voter, kind of steering away from the Democrats and revisiting Donald Trump because they can't buy a home. They are stuck living with their parents.
The rents are high.
Rents are way too high. It's becoming unaffordable to buy a home. And that is something that I think was, quote unquote, part of the American dream here in the United States.
Well, the dream right now is on hold because while prices have risen of homes, you're feeling a little better because they tell you it's worth a little more. The problem is if you go to sell it and buy something else, instead of paying 2-3% for your mortgage, you're paying 6 to 8% for your mortgage. The affordability has gone down by 50%. So you can't buy these houses, and there's an overhang in the economy. And I think that's the other reason people aren't feeling that good, because on paper they say it looks like they have some money in their house value, but if you actually do the trade, it goes away.
What's your prediction going into 2024 in terms of the economy?
Well, there's so much. I don't have a macro prediction. I can only. I think it's going to depend so much on events. I mean, right now the war in Gaza, Israel's now fighting war on 7 fronts, and we've now got Iran arming the Houthis with weapons, and they're taking out commercial ships in the Red Sea. And if you look at the map,
our troops.
and attacking our troops, and if you look at map, commercial ships are now going around Africa rather than through the Red Sea. We could have a Suez Canal type crisis this year. We also don't know what China is going to end up doing with Taiwan. We know that they're making the calculation that with Biden and Blinken and Lloyd Austin in control, they feel like they've got a free hand to do almost anything they want to do. If Trump comes in, they don't. So these global events, I think, are going to have a big effect on the economy, and those are completely unpredictable.
Real quick question on that. I know you look younger than me, but you're not. And you talk to people, we don't learn history in school anymore, unfortunately, in too many of our schools. But World War I was this kind of crazy series of events, and you can look at World War II.
I wasn't there for that.
I know you weren't there for that, but you understand the fact that whatever
I read a lot of history.
a world war is a regional conflict, right?
Yeah.
In multiple parts of the globe that are tricky and they metastasize.
Yeah.
And so you can look at this and say, oh, well, what Russia's doing is that's a European problem. You can look at the Middle East and say, well, that's Israel's problem. But eventually, all these are colliding, and they all have something in common, which we just talked about with the economy, which is kind of like the bad guys on the economy are kind of the bad guys on these conflicts too. And how much are they feeding it, and how much will they gain if they can destabilize
I think
things?
that's exactly the point. You can't really talk about the economy without talking how these things could interact. I mean, remember I'm older, but when I'm reading things, global events as a kid, it was sort of like, well, that was happening, as you point, over here or over there. It's never going to touch us. We're America. We're not. But the thing we're missing is that America, in many ways, is being eclipsed by the rest of the economy. Where the growth now is in Asia, not just China, but you look at Malaysia, you look at India. India just launched they just put a vehicle on the moon this last year, and so there's events developing there. The world's moving along. The United States is less dominant. We're no longer the hegemon, and I think we're seeing that playing out in Ukraine, where we thought we could just sort of order things about and bring about an outcome, and in the process topple Putin. That hadn't worked. We predicted it wouldn't work, and it's not working. So, the Americans are waking up to the fact that these events outside our borders, I think, are going to affect us, and we're bringing the problem right in through the southern border right now.
Yeah. I want to get final thoughts from both of you. Matt, politically, as we go into this presidential year, which we believe is going to be, we thought 2020 was insane. I think this one's going to be one of the toughest years that we're going to be facing politically. I think Biden's going to keep running on Bidenomics. He attempts to do it. He's trying to sell it. People aren't buying it. What do you think are going to be the other issues he's going to focus on, and how can Trump push back?
I think it's so interesting that our politics are dominated now by presidents. People don't know who senators and congressmen are by and large.
Yeah.
DeSantis popped during COVID, but by and large, it's all about who the president is. It's all about executive power. Reagan came to town. It was Reaganomics, and it was controversial. It was considered a slur. Mm-hmm. Over time, it healed itself and healed the economy, and it was like, oh yeah, Reaganomics, that's one of his great legacies. You had Obamacare, and there was this whole controversy about should we call it Obamacare or not, and Obama famously took to the podium and said, yeah, it's Obamacare. Like, he wanted to imprint his name on it. And the Biden people are having this controversy about, is it Bidenomics, or do we not want to grab the economy? And I think they're trying to grab a hold of it and say, this is ours.
Well, but I'm supposed to understand these economic things. I couldn't tell you what a Bidenomics is.
Yeah, you could.
That is so.
No, you could, because you.
What is it?
It really is.
Inquiring minds want to know.
It has nothing to do with economics, I would say. Yeah. Bidenomics is, we will conform with the World Economic Forum. We will conform with these globalists. When Justin Trudeau has the craziest idea that his true father, kind of like imparted in him, Fidel Castro is what it might be a joke, but maybe not.
He does look
like
him.
He sure sounds like him.
It looks like him.
He's a French version, I guess. But the point is that whatever these extreme things are, and we've seen it in our country, and we've come to call it woke, and we do mean that as a slur, because it's slang. First of all, it's not really a word, but it's this idea that you've woken up to the idea that America's a bad place. That what has dominated the economy, the truths we were taught that would have economic flourishing are racist, bad for people, et cetera. And so he has these, I think you said it earlier, it's like, it is the climate change agenda, it is the diversity, equity, and inclusion agenda. I'm sure we could keep going down these other paths. It's everything we know that's anti-American, that they are jamming in on us. And I think a lot of us feel like, with his executive power, there's very little we can do to stop it.
Well, but you look at the climate agenda, we're supposed to be transitioning the entire world economy away from fossil fuels for some ephemeral wind and solar thing. So we got this distant thing which is supposed to be good. In the meantime, they're asking people to sacrifice everything they've got right now.
That's right.
I don't think that's an attractive economic policy, and the same thing's true with DEI. We're supposed to right these historical wrongs, which we already did.
And now they just wanted to keep.
And so that's an endless thing. You can never make things equity. You can never make things equal. You can never meet the objective. And so people are asking to buy into things, and they're saying, okay, well, when does this end? When have we achieved it? And it's unachievable, because the real goal, as you point out, is power.
So the key is people don't like Trump. The same reason why a lot of people didn't like DeSantis when he stood up during all the Corona stuff. They don't like him because he's scary, because it seems like he's going to create chaos, which means kind of like break it all down, right? And that's always a question in politics. That seems scary. Would you rather have kind of a synthesis where you tinker? You can't tinker with a global climate change agenda. You're either going to do it or you're going to stop it. You can't tinker with this idea that America is intrinsically racist, and everything about our systems harm people of color. You're either going to stop that insanity, or you're going to go along with it. You're either going to go along with the indoctrination of our kids in these public schools, in private schools too, in our elite institutions like Harvard, et cetera, all these terrible places. You're either going to kind of like go along with that and be dirty with that, or you're going to stop it. And so that's kind of where our politics are. So I agree with what you're saying, which is, this is a real question. Like, is this appealing to normal voters, to the majority? Because it harms them.
Look at the polls. It is not, but it's not about the economic statistics. It's how people are feeling and the agenda that they're being asked to sign up for. And
And voters have always been self-interested. I mean, part of this is how is this going to help me, pay my bills, raise my kids, prosper in my job? And I think they're quietly saying, this is not working for me. So here's a question for you, the comms expert. I think I like the fact that the Biden people are in an egotistical way saying, yeah, it is Bidenomics. I think that's almost good for us because I think Biden is a failed political brand.
Well, as I'm trying to wrap up this segment,
Was that a good way to end?
that's a great way to end. I think for Bidenomics, Bidenomics represents weakness. When you see him physically on stage, toppling over, unable to finish a sentence, reading off of note cards, it is truly about weakness. And that's, I think, going back to the psychology or the feeling of people, I think they view Biden and they don't have a sense of feeling secure. And people want to feel secure. They want to feel financially secure. They want to feel that they can raise their families without the government being involved. And when you have the constant pushing of gender ideology, diversity, equity, inclusion, a climate agenda, the Bidenomics, that whole phrase, I think for people, it's just simply not working. And I think that's why you're seeing this intense change, this drastic shift in the polls, even with young voters, with minority voters, where they're saying, I don't think we can keep going this direction. And with that, we're going to wrap up. But we all want to wish you a very happy new year. And there's going to be, talk about an intense year. I think we're ready for it. CPAC's ready for it. Make sure you join us at CPAC February 21st to the 24th in Washington, D.C. We're going to talk about incredible discussions, conversations, and ability to get involved as we move into.
I just got an announcement. We're going to have a really interesting speaker, which we're not going to make public yet, but it's going to be an interesting conference.
Yes, absolutely. So come join us. Go to cpac.org. Get your tickets now.